Tell me about yourself. This is a question that's going to come up in the interview, and it's going to come up at whichever stage of the interview you're at. So, how do we deal with it? And how do we change it depending on where we are in the interview process? So, what I'm going to do today is I'm going to look through one of my older clients, gentleman in his early 50s, who was applying for a position. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to run through the process of how I would look at your CV, how I would look at your history, and how I would select the most relevant pieces of information. And it's quite a long-winded process. It's not something that can be done in 10 minutes. So what we need to do is we need to find the key bits of information, and we need to be able to condense that into 2 to 3 minutes of a tell me about yourself question. As I said, it's going to change depending on which stage of the interview you're at. So interview one, you're probably going to give a brief resume of your whole CV. Interview two is going to be you're getting closer to the job. You're going to be closer to the people that are going to be making the decisions. So we're going to focus on what you're going to bring to the new company, the job that you're applying for. So in the second interview, we're not going to give the whole CV. We're going to start selecting the more relevant parts. And if we go to the third interview, for sure, you're going to be with your line manager. Your new line manager is going to be involved. You're very much talking about what you're bringing to the new company. So we're changing the tell me about yourself answer from a full resume of your CV, telling them how you got to being sat in front of them, to more relevant information, probably about the industry, and we'll see how it works with my clients in a little while as I'm going to run through his CV. And then to the third interview, where you're more specifically talking about the skills and the most relevant, the most recent job, and how that's going to transfer to the new job, what you're going to bring with you. Okay, and this is a guy in his early 50s who, in his last job change, it was sales. So it's very much a sales background. Now, going through his life, he left school at about 15, 16. He had the belief that education in itself was not enough, that you needed to have a combination of education and experience. And this is something that we see today, that people are constantly complaining about not having experience. Now, unfortunately, he was a little bit misguided, because I believe even at 22, you've got 22 years of experience. It just needs extracting. It just needs sitting down, looking through to find out what your experience is. It might not be job experience, but you've definitely got experience of life. So he left school 15, 16, went into industry and worked in position of all things as a cheesemaker. And you don't really meet too many cheesemakers these days. And he worked there. There was the first step change where he moved into management. So the first job, it's resulted in redundancy. He then moved into another job where there was a management position. That didn't really work out. And he left that job, I think, to go to college. No, he left that job to go to hire shops. Sorry. Left that job to go to hire shops, and he began working in hire shops as a driver, delivery driver, and assistant branch manager. And what happened there was he started to get a bit of a taste of commercial life, dealing with people, dealing with customers, selling add-ons, targets, and enjoyed it. Really, really enjoyed that. So he decided that's where he was going to make progressions, that perhaps sales was an area that would be quite interesting for him, or at least working in commerce. And we started to see the change with experience and education. And he decided to leave that company, go back to college, improve his education, because that was going to improve his prospects. Key point there, when he handed in his resignation, I think one of the area managers said to him, or gave him a letter, that call me when you finish your education. Thank you very much for everything. Call me when you finish your studies. We'll discuss a new opening for you. When he got to the end of the education, sales had started to take in that that's what he wanted to do. And I think during that time he worked in a bar. During the college time he worked in a bar part-time and started really developing an interest in dealing with people. So hospitality was an option, but he went for motor trade. And he went into the motor trade because, dude, why not? And the opportunities there were greater. So with the hire shop, if we look at the structure of the hire shop, they had, 150 branches across the country, but a sales team of maybe 10, 20 people dealing with larger organisations, so construction companies. So the step from being a driver to being sales was quite big and going to be quite challenging. And I think there was an aspect there that he saw that he really didn't have the experience level. But going to the motor trade, again, they had something like 125 branches. Each branch had 3 salespeople. There was a greater opportunity of getting into sales there. So he moved across van deliveries, van sales, full sales area. Okay. And he loved it. From there, it was then back into the situation of improve the education, we're going to improve the sales position that we can get. And again, there are 2 ways you could look at that. One is go through the experience route, the other one is to go through the educational route, and he chose to go through the education route. Left the degree, qualified, moved into ventilation. So it's a completely different area again. We now have hire shops, we have motor trade, and we have ventilation. Worked in the ventilation industry for a couple of years. He was given a cold area, which had a turnover of about 30,000, I think the number is £30,000 a year. After 18 months or so, turned that into 300,000. And life stepped in the way and things happened, and he was then put in a position that he was given an opportunity of moving abroad and a different set of opportunities, and made a decision that he would move abroad. So he handed in his resignation. Second opportunity there was that he received a letter or a call or whatever, I can't remember, stating that if things didn't work out abroad, he could always come back to the company. We're moving forward to 2008, 2009, and I understand that things didn't really work out abroad. During that time, he'd worked as a freelancer, set up a couple of businesses, but the economic crisis took its toll. So he came back to the UK, back into the ventilation company, had the letter, straight back into them. And this is where we get to the real nuts and bolts of the story. So this was probably about 2013 that he gone back to the ventilation company. And it was a little bit interesting that the company had changed. It wasn't exactly the same as it was previously. And by 2015, the company got bankrupt and he was left looking for work again. No fault of his, bankruptcy. His was the only area, he tells me, that was growing. The other sales staff were either stagnant or moving backwards. And there were lots of other problems, which I won't go into, that resulted in the company going bankrupt. So he moved into another job, which was in compressors. It didn't work out well. So that's an area that we're not going to focus on. You're not under deposition in an interview. You're not under oath. So we're going to skip over this, not talk about it. It wasn't a good fit. It was an experience thing. It was learning. And yeah, not important. But he moved back into ventilation with an air handling unit company. So big step change. And one of the things we're looking at is from 2013 to the current position, we're looking at pretty much doubling his salary. So the ventilation company that was bankrupt. There was a basic of about 25,000 plus commissions pushing OTE to about 40,000. The job that they're looking at now has a basic closer to 40,000 with on-target earnings being 60, 70, 80,000. Okay, so more or less unlimited. So huge step change in the salary, huge step change in the environments that we're looking at. So around about 2016, we're moving into the air handling unit arena. And new product, new area, different clientele. With the ventilation industry, you're dealing with contractors and installers. With air handling units, you're dealing with architects and mechanical engineers. Targets significantly changed. So he took an area from 30,000 to 300,000. Now he's dealing with a target of £1 million. And after a couple of years there, I think it was a couple of years there, target was hit. Excuse me, but he'd hit and looking at a point where he was now specialised and he was starting to get into a bit of a niche of educational projects, and particularly working on government projects where BB 101, a certain set of specifications were required and knowledge of the document was required. So not just building regulations, BB 101. So that brings us to the position that we're looking at now. So you wanted to make a move again into a different area, that someone started sounding him out. And this is the position where we are at the moment, that someone's sounding him out about moving across to another company who have a new product which is looking at educational systems. So we're going to look at education. And we are very much in the territory of doubling the salary. So in a 5-year period, we're doubling the salary just by progressing through jobs. And that's where we are at the moment, is what do we take from that history to build into the tell me about yourself? And what other things can we talk about there? So the one area that we can look at that jumps out at me is that there are a couple of companies there that loved him, that they saw something so positive in him that they wanted him to come back when he'd resigned, that there was an open letter to come back whenever he wants. Second thing is that he's good at sales. Okay, he's built areas. He's shown in various environments that he can build an area, that he has skill of cold calling, that he likes cold calling, that's something that not a lot of salespeople enjoy. This client loved it, whether you like that or not. Okay, so we're now looking at a position where he can go through his full CV and he can talk about different jobs, different challenges, moving forward, the motivations that he had from going from job to job. We can look at a more sales focused of going from job to job because of sales, loving sales, pushing areas, developing areas. And then we can talk even further about what he can bring to the new company, that he has experience of working with BB 101. So that the company he's applying for, or the most recent company, is looking at a new product for schools. So he's got the experience that he can bring forward, and he's got a customer list that he can take into the new company, and more or less, even though you're going from a natural ventilation to a mechanical ventilation, they're still looking at the same projects. So we can now sell him on the prospect that he's got a customer base that he can bring across. He's got experience of selling into government projects. He's got experience of selling using BB 101. And all this is going to come in, and these are the pertinent areas, these are the important facts that we can bring into the 2 to 3 minute story. So he's going to talk about how he's developed his background, how he fell into sales, or designed fall into sales, how he's built areas, how he developed cold calling, how he's learned at different stages, how he's adaptable, how he can look at different products, how he's got the flexibility, he's always looking, he's got the ambition, he's always pushing forward, he's always happy to learn. And the good news is that in his early 50s, he got that job. So he's now working in a company where he's talking to specifiers, he's doubled his salary, and he's getting specifications in schools with a new product. I mean, success. But it's not a 5-minute process. It's not something you can do. That took a couple of hours to dig down, to find the story, to get the background. It's not something that you're going to do quite easily. It was a collaboration between the client and myself to sit and look and see exactly what it was, to find the thread. So please press the link below, get in contact, let's make an appointment, and let's get you moving into your next job. Let's get you doubling your salary. Let's get you doing the job that you want to do. There's a dream job out there. Let's do it.